It wouldn't be spring in New York in 2015 if winter hadn't reared its ugly head one more time. Had some snow this week. Weren't able to race on Friday, but everything is good now here at the Big A. Hi, everybody, and welcome to the National Racing Report. Richard Migliore, Andy Serling, Jason Blewett on vacation this week. We have a sort of odd mix of races this week. One theoretical Triple Crown prep.
Yeah, theoretical. I like the way you worded that. It is a mixed bag. We got some interesting stuff to talk about. I thought some of the best races were right here at home at Aqueduct. And like you alluded to, winter came in March like a lion, and it's leaving March like a lion.
Yeah, I said that on Twitter the other day. I said I thought March was supposed to go out with like a lamb. It is not going out like a lamb, but you never know. It'll probably warm up around here eventually. The action was pretty hot, though, at Turfway Park, as Turfway Park had their biggest series of races, and that was yesterday. And that was led by the Horseshoe Casino Cincinnati Spiral Stakes. And we had an upset here. Talk about the early running, Richie.
Yeah, I mean, you see Jose Lezcano on the far outside on Dubai Sky. He sent his horse along. He didn't break particularly well, but you can see right here, Andy, I love this. He's consciously looking for that gap, that break to fall in and find himself. Now, he had a horse with speed to do it, but you could see it was a conscious effort.
I agree. I love Mike Smith, who's behind him, veering towards the inside. Interfered a little bit with the Ramsey horse behind him, but Mike Smith had post 9. He didn't want to get caught up in the pace. He knew there was speed in here, and he got down the inside. Now, I like the fact that Royal Sun, who was the second choice, and we'll talk about Metaboss in a couple of seconds, his rider didn't want to get forced down the inside. He decided to take him outside and get that good stalking position. The only knock, I would say, and it's easy now because he ran poorly, was that when he ran so well in his prep on this surface, he just went from the start. And I'm beginning to think that this is a horse that is not comfortable rating.
No, I would agree with that. Let's be fair, too, though. It was more pace in this race than the last one. And now,
tougher field.
And last time, I think there was no pressure on the rider because I don't think he was expected that he absolutely had to win. And now this time, you're kind of maybe feeling the heat a little bit. You're the hunted one. And the winner's right outside him, lapped on him. I know I wanted to talk a little bit about Metaboss.
He's moving up on the outside in the blue. Talk about it.
Yeah, well, he's going to be fanned, you know, ridiculously wide. And I think he wasn't going to win anyway, but he really had never had position or any opportunity to win the way the race ran.
I totally agree with you, Richie. You know, you look at the trip that he had as compared to the trip of the second-place finisher, the 9-horse. Mike Smith made that conscious effort. He didn't want to get involved in the pace, but as you like to say, you got to save ground on one turn. He did it in the first turn because he knew he probably couldn't do it in the second turn. Now, none of us are arguing that the winner wasn't best because the winner, Dubai Sky, did all the dirty work.
Yeah.
He was wide the whole way. Not, you know, he saved a little ground the first turn, but he effectively didn't save a ton of ground, and he was just the best horse. But Metaboss, it felt like Alex Solis had that moment early when there was a slight break, when he could have used his horse a little bit to try to get some inside position. Instead, he just stayed out in the middle of the track the whole way.
Yeah, and I think you've got to take those positions going inside when you can, because you can't be wide on both turns unless you're so much the best. And as the races get tougher and they're more competitive, you have to take edges. That's what we saw Mike Smith do on the inside in the first turn. Mike Smith has always gotten a bad rap, in my estimation, about a guy who always wants to be wide. He saves ground when it's important to save ground, and then his philosophy on riding is to get in the clear and don't get a horse stopped when they have momentum.
I can't argue with that philosophy, and I think there's an interesting talk about this race as compared to the race that Metaboss was coming out of the El Camino Real at Golden Gate, which we talked about. In that race, the horse who finished second in here, I believe, Conquest, Typhoon, he actually was involved in the pace, and it was a very tough pace and a contested pace, whereas Metaboss had this perfect trip, saving some ground, and sitting well behind them. They came to the stretch. Metaboss was easily able to angle out and get by the field, and Conquest Typhoon did pretty well just to finish third in that race. In this race, he's the one that got the better trip. He tucked in behind them, and he got the candy trip, whereas Metaboss had a very tough trip. And also, because the pace was slower, I think, at Golden Gate, he was able to get his position without having to run that hard. In this race, when they went faster, he had to use his horse more, and that's also why he may have been flat.
Yeah, no, and I agree with all that. This is starting to sound a little more like a trips and traps, but one thing I know we can agree on for sure, the winner was very good and got a very good ride.
No, the winner's a really nice horse, and it's just, once again, it's typical Bill Mott.
Yeah.
Bill Mott has been nursing this horse along. They took a shot in here. Now, this is a turf horse. I got a 93 buyer in here. I think Keeneland watched this race and thinks we made the right move going back to dirt. My question, of course, to Richie and to all of you is whether or not you think Bill Mott and the connections will pay $6,000 to supplement a horse in the Derby that likely has less than no chance.
I don't think Bill Mott's going to go to the Derby unless he absolutely believes he's got a big chance. I say he doesn't show up in the Derby.
Yeah, I don't think he will. But I tell you what, they got a nice horse, and it's starting to look like the turf horses are catching up to the dirt horses. There's some good turf horses out there of both sexes. We have one more race from Turfway Park. Speaking of both sexes, we have the Bonnet Oaks actually coming up in this race, and we'll pick the race up fairly late in here. Don't Leave Me, another turf horse coming from Canada. I think the distance got her the win more than anything else because the horse in front, Sweet Success, a very nice horse for Rusty Arnold, but Richie, I don't think she wants any part of the mile. But she fought it out fairly well.
She did, and you can kind of see around the turn. She was flicking her ears a little bit until she got pressure from the outside. I almost think, Annie, she got so engaged with the horse lapped on her outside, Charlotte Ray, if I'm saying that correctly, that she never even saw the filly on her far outside. And sometimes when a horse gets so focused on one horse, they kind of lose it. And you see a lot of bouncing around going in behind. The winner was out in the clear. I give the winner credit, though. She rallied wide and went and got the money. But I wonder if it might not have been a little bit different because this filly got a little green when she got by herself.
Yeah, you're right. She is moving in and out and drifting a little bit. The other horse gets by her enough, but you're right. It's not as though she just blows by her and wins by 2. Very good ride by Jose Lezcano, who had an exceptional day out in Turfway Park, not only winning with Dubai Sky in the big race, but winning there as well. And once again, it's what Richie talked about. He saved ground in the first turn, so it wasn't as big a problem when he had to go wide in the second turn.
Yeah, and I think you and I both agree, I know we do actually, that Jose Lezcano, for my money, is as good as anybody, and he gets the right opportunities, he makes the most of them.
No, I agree. Jose Lezcano, if I had horses, Jose Lezcano would be a rider I would be going to as often as possible. He does a terrific job. We're going to go back across the country, or halfway across the country, and go to Laurel Park. They had a couple of races, and this is one I'm eager to talk about with Richie, because here's By the Moon, last year's Frizette winner, and we talked about her when she had her first race down in Florida, how she was a little over-aggressively ridden into a very fast pace. She got a much comfortable pace here and a little bit of class relief, and she showed that she can still run very well.
Oh, and absolutely. I mean, she set that perfect trip. When they go 24 and change, 48 and change, a one-turn mile, and she was always comfortable. I mean, she's shown the ability to handle mud in the past as well. She was basically a winner every step, and I think it was a great job by Michelle Nevin picking this spot. Good confidence booster, something to go forward off of.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I have to imagine, obviously the temptation is to go to Kentucky Oaks, and I don't see why they shouldn't go to Kentucky Oaks. I still think, but once again, you think about she won the Frizette, she won this race, and as you say, she likes the mud. Hopefully it won't rain on Belmont Day. But the Acorn and the Test are the races they probably have circled for this horse.
Well, she definitely has the feel of me of more of a one-turn type filly. And you think about her mother, by the light, she was definitely better 7 furlongs and under. This filly's capable of going a little bit further. She's a little bit rangier, a little bit scopier than her mom. Still not convinced she's a 2-turn horse.
Yeah, she's a nice horse. Once again, and, talking about speed figure, she got an 82 by her. And we're seeing that with too many of these fillies. Now they're 3-year-olds. They're still not running super fast races. We've seen some fast races from the boys. The girls still haven't broken through on the turf. One of the fastest horses is Condo Commando, and she's going to be running in our Gazelle here. I am a fan of Condo Commando, and I think she might be at top of that class. I just want to see her take some pressure and deal with it early.
But usually fillies versus the colts, like boys and girls, usually the fillies mature a little faster than the boys. Haven't really seen anybody break through.
No, there's some nice horses, but so far they're a little bit on the slow side, and we'll see what Condo Commando does when she runs in the Gazelle here on Wood Memorial Day, a day that is coming up very soon. Well, I'm very excited about looking at the private terms in the next race because Angel Cruz gives a perfect ride to Bridget's Big Lovey in this race, and Rich and I have talked about this, the value of speed. When you put speed horses on the lead, good things happen.
Yeah, and being aggressive pays off a lot of times. Nice to see him get a stakes win. As an apprentice, you don't get that apprentice allowance in a stake, so that people are showing confidence in him and his riding. He went through about a week or two, maybe a little bit longer, where I thought he was just too complacent. I know you agree with me, and he kind of came out of that, and now he's riding horses to their strengths.
Yeah, absolutely. This is what I love about this kid, and I know you agree with this. He has adapted. When he's made mistakes, he's fixed them, and he's moved forward. And he's done this on a number of occasions, and it's been really nice watching him ride in the winter. And we always get to see these apprentices in the winter, and it's very tough to go from an apprentice to being a journeyman, and not surprisingly, a lot of them disappoint going forward. This kid is showing the signs that he is not going to disappoint.
Well, because he learns, like you said. If he does something that isn't right or he doesn't feel is right, he improves on it. You're going to see late in the game here, gets a little bit excited, which is, I remember winning my first stake race. Like, wow, I'm going to get it, and he's already celebrating a little bit. you want that enthusiasm. Of course, keep it together.
Right.
But I was very happy for him and proud of the strides he's made as a rider.
Yeah, no, I agree. He's a terrific kid and a good rider here. Nice to see Jeremiah Englehart win the stake. I'd actually been texting with a little before the race and saying, I hope you're going to lead with this horse. And he said, that's the plan. Well, it was the plan, and they worked it to absolute perfection. We've got a lot more going on the National Racing Report. We're going to take a short break. Richie and I will be back as we head down to Gulfstream Park. As we head down to Gulfstream Park for the race named for one of my favorite horses, Inside Information, a 7-furlong race. Mary Meadow, the heavy 1-2 favorite. She was never comfortable down the inside, Richie, and I just think that that's not her best running style. But because the inside horse had no speed, I think Javier just got sort of forced into setting on the pace, but she ran so badly, it has to be more than that.
Yeah, well, that's what I was going to say. I mean, maybe she's not comfortable there, but when you get beat that far, I think, it's a stretch to just put it on that. I think, after a few days, they'll probably find the reason. There has to be more of a reason. She's obviously much more talented than that, and she really basically just quit.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully she's okay, and maybe it's just one of those things. The 3-horse Sweet Whiskey, who was actually coming back and hadn't run since November at Aqueduct, actually had finished behind the eventual winner, Classic Point, and we'll certainly get to her. I thought she ran exceptionally well, and Classic Point won because this was a very good patient ride from Paco Lopez.
Yeah, and the outside position, outside of the other speeds, is kind of what set up that trip, and Paco did give her a nice patient ride. Sweet Whiskey hung in there. It looked at one point that Classic Point might get run down from the outside by You Bought Her, who was coming from, who's not even in the picture. Got a very patient ride from Corey Lannery. And it's almost like she spotted her from the outside of her blinker cup and went on a little bit, because I thought she was going to get swallowed at the 16th ball.
Well, she was very game in winning her prior start, which was to go for one back here on Thanksgiving weekend, and she showed that gameness again. But at the end of the day, this was a very sort of emotional win, because this is a horse that Alan Jerkins, the chief, trained. His son Jimmy Jerkins trains her now, and I mean, obviously this was a week where Alan Jerkins was the biggest story in racing.
No, absolutely, and he actually asked the owner, Joe Shields, to give this filly to Jimmy when he wasn't coming back to New York. Her and House Rules, who we're going to see in a little while. And now, on the heels of Alan passing earlier in the week, for her to win, I can't even imagine the emotions Jimmy was going through.
No, absolutely. And, Jimmy's a friend of ours, and they were all friends of ours, and friends of racing. That's the thing. And I think that's the thing about the Chief that has come out the most as you read the stories that people are telling and talking about him. And he lived the life that he wanted to lead, and he was a wonderful man. But he was such a part of the fabric of racing for all of us in racing, and he gave everything he had to everybody.
And he did, and he touched all of our lives in such a positive way. And I just all week have been going back to thinking about pushing the feed cart for him, talking horses, going to play touch football with him, riding for him and getting yelled at or complimented. He was emotional, and he always let it out. Just a tremendous man.
He was. He was a great racetracker, and he was a great person, and he will be missed forever. But the thing about the Chief is he'll also be remembered forever, and I think that's the most that you can say about anybody. And he leaves behind a legacy in racing that also includes his sons. And Jimmy Jerkins, of course, took over the training at Classic Point. It was a nice cherry on the top of this week. Well, as it's racing, all good stories come to an end, and Jimmy Jerkins was saddling House Rules in the next race for the same connections, Jerry Shields. She was a heavy favorite in this race, but the horse that she had beaten last time, and she had kind of interfered a little in the stretch, it didn't cost the win, was able to beat her. But this is once again, Richie, another dynamics lesson. The horse that beat her, that she beat last time, that wins here, Sheer Drama, she was in the teeth of the battle last time, where House Rules was sitting the perfect trip. Joe Bravo did a great job getting her to rate comfortably today, and House Rules had no answer.
He really did a great job of doing just that. The other thing he did, which I think he might have got caught up a little bit last time, was he was very aware of where House Rules was and didn't let her get the momentum or the drop on him. Where last time I thought he kind of waited a little too long on her. She got to her, kind of put her in a tough position in between horses. You saw him looking around before he got to the quarter pole, and he kicked on. Now, he was the best horse, but I like when a rider goes on.
Well, you can see it with the times. It's a perfect example of what you're talking about. The fastest quarter was the third quarter, and that's a quarter being run around a turn. So they're really picking it up, and that's the proof positive of what you're talking about. Yeah. He used that horse's speed as a weapon at the most important time of the race.
Right. He looked under his shoulder twice. He saw her face and said, all right, it's time to get going. Let's get out of Dodge. If you're going to beat me, you got to come and catch me.
And I think that's one of our complaints around here, especially. Riders are nursing horses along too much, too long. You can't. You're letting everybody else in the race, and your horses are not always going to be able to pop away from them in the stretch.
Yeah, I mean, they're big animals. They got to build into a stride. You know, I know a rider runs the risk of being criticized if he opens up and gets caught. But I think you allow horses to stay in the race if you don't make use of your speed.
Yeah, I think you have to know the horses. I mean, like anything, they're adaptable. And I think one of the great riders, and I think you'll agree with this, in the past of doing this was George Velasquez. He was brilliant on the right speed horses, of letting other horses get in the game, maybe even get ahead of them coming to the top of the stretch, give them that false confidence, and then running away from them. You can do that, but you can't do that with every horse.
No, and I think Joe learned something last time to go on when he had the opportunity. Now, of course, the pace was a little different, and you have the ability to do that when you've gone slow enough. But I thought it was a great ride, and the filly ran huge.
No, she ran huge. She might have won anyway, but he did everything right, and that's all you can want out of a rider. We're going to go on to California, and I want to talk about the San Luis Rey, a race 1.5 miles. It starts all the way at the top of the hill course. We're going to show the early part, and Richie has real experience in the hill course. Neither of the two speeds in here, Joe's Blazing Air as well as Diamond Bachelor, I think, we're going to win this race. But I think that both these horses might have been very adversely affected by having to run down the hill and going too fast too soon.
Yeah, and I think Diamond Bachelor, he has a little more experience down the hill. Joe's Blazing Arrow, he got to running off. And you could see that Joe Talma was trying to throttle him, and this horse just got so keen. And I think when they get that momentum coming down the hill, and it's a lot more significant drop than people realize. You really do come downhill. He just ran through the dirt. It didn't take him off the bridle. And at this point, he set sail. He's on his way.
Well, they won a 22-second quarter. The reason I thought of it, and we're going to pick the race up very soon around the half-mile pole, was that we saw Diamond Bachelor almost upset the field 1.25 miles when we were out there, Richie, about a month or so ago. And that 1.25 mile race, it doesn't start at the hill. It starts right on the top of the course. And in this case, yes, there's another speed, but they both got too caught up in it, and they understandably collapsed.
Yeah, and I think it really rattled Joe's Blazing Arrow, and he was getting out after that. He's on one rein here. I think Gary Stevens saw that, moved a little aggressively to make sure he could hold him in so he didn't carry him out. And here comes Finnegan's Wake with that huge middle move, which he always does. And he throws his best punch, and Ashley Love Sugar just shook it off and kicked on again.
No, I agree. This was one. I mean, Finnegan's Wake was a heavy favorite. Ashley Love Sugars is an up-and-comer, but was a 5-to-1 shot. And you're right. I mean, you thought in the turn, well, Finnegan's Wake is going to go on and win this race. If somebody beats him, I thought maybe there was a horse behind him that might catch him. But Ashley Love Sugar, under that perfect ride by Gary Stevens, who, when he rides well, there's no better rider in the country. I think Ashley Love Sugar is a very good example, though, of distance being a great equalizer. A talented horse that's improving, but I think the distance is what really made this horse look better.
Yeah, I agree with you. He has stamina, got a perfect trip. Gary did give him that ride. And you can almost see when Finnegan's Wake got to him, there was no panic in Gary. He still knew he had horse underneath him, and he finally set him down coming to the 8th pole. That's when experience really shows, because you don't rattle in a big race when somebody gets on top of you.
No, I completely agree, and a good training job by Peter Urton. And Peter Miller's also done a great job with Finnegan's Wake. He just was no match for the winner in here. Well, the good news is we're coming home. We've been out to California. We've been all over the country. But we had the first New York Claiming Championship Series here yesterday, and we're going to come back with 5 races and some highlights of the most exciting races we saw. I think one of the most fun things, especially for Richie and I and a lot of people, about the Claiming Series yesterday was looking at the names the horses that the races were named for. And as you pointed out, every one of them ran claiming races, even though many of them went on to bigger and better things.
Yeah, and to me, this is the heart and soul of the game. The claiming horses show up and do it every day. And the names, I wrote a bunch of them, and I chased the rest of them. So
yeah, I bet you did write a lot of the horses. Starting out with Videogenic was one of 3 races that was named for a horse that Gaspar Moschera did very well for. This was the performance of the day. Claimed out of a race for 12.5 and switched to David Jacobson. Cornelio could barely hold this horse back on the turn. A 106 buyer for this horse. There were a number of very good horses running in different 6-furlong races yesterday. This was easily the fastest.
And you could see visually when he asked her to run, she really kicked on. I mean, visually it was impressive, and obviously speed figure-wise it's impressive. One thing I go back to, and obviously this is the best race of her life, and she has improved for David Jacobson. You get those 12.5s, like 25 down to 12.5, open claimers in California, they're tough, tough horses. Where you see people go wrong, you'll get some $25,000 maiden come out of California and show up at parks and get way overbet. Those horses are horrible, but the open claimers, they're hickory.
And I think that David Jacobson is aware of that, and that's probably one of the reasons. And he's been one guy who's been taking a number of horses out of California, and it's horse racing. It's not always going to work out, but in some cases it has worked out very, very well. And he has an extremely promising horse with Room for Me. And we've seen it before with David. You think about Aslutos Amigo, you think about Saginaw. They don't always work out going forward, but sometimes they work out, and they work out very well. She may have a future. Wanted to show, I think the next race that we're going to show is the Mr. Sinatra Stakes, actually, and this was a horse, Stormy Monarco, that was just getting class relief, Richie.
Yeah, I mean, it was really, really a drop down in class for him, and he responded the way he was supposed to. He looked like a winner every step, and again, a horse that just visually drew up. You could see his body drop down, and he kicked away. Mr. Sinatra won the Queens County on him many, many years ago.
Wow, Mr. Sinatra's a neat horse. I remember actually, was he running opposed against Delay of Game in a race you and I had talked about? He might have been second in that race, or maybe that was like the Stuyvesant or one of those races.
Yeah.
So many races, so many good memories. And that's the thing. Stormy Monarco's a really nice horse, but for me, looking back on these horses, and I know that you and I are the same on this, I couldn't help but think about some of the horses these races were named for.
Oh, and just tremendous, horses that basically comprised the heart and soul of the game through the 80s and into the 90s.
No, I agree, and this is the kind of horse you want to see win races like this. A horse like Stormy Monarco, another David Jacobson claim, and he had run okay, better in out-of-town stakes, but he had run well enough in some of our races, and he just found a field he was better than. I was very surprised he wasn't favored. They went to Celebrated Talent, the speed for Linda Rice, and I was really surprised, and that was one where the public just got it wrong.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, he was just dropping out of much tougher races, and he got it done. Maybe it was the lack of success in New York before, but like you said, they were much tougher races.
No, and he showed he's still a very, very nice horse. The next race we're going to show, I don't know how good ultimately these horses are. I know that City was a good horse and a great claim by trainer Rick Dutrow, but this was a sensational ride from start to finish by Jose Ortiz.
Well, it really was. I mean, she got off the step.
Number 7.
Yeah, it's up 7, creeping up through the field, along the rail, very patient. She got off a step slow. Ultimately, I think it helped her because she just dropped down to the fence and saved every inch of ground, and she's going to need a break or two, but this was a tremendous ride.
But Jose never panics. He makes sure he's in there. If he didn't have room, he let her relax a little bit towards the back. He starts sending around the 5/16 pole. He didn't really have to worry. There was enough separation about some live cover, and he's able to come through on the inside. And I tell you something, she puts in a nice run. She was coming off a bit of a trip. There were no killers in here, but this was a horse that won because of the ride, as much as any.
Yeah, I mean, when you get that kind of ground-saving trip on the inner track and find that clear path, I mean, she never had a pebble in her way. Just a tremendous, tremendous ride, and a great effort from her. Some horses will kind of get in there and they'll want to hang a little bit. I mean, she did kick on, so we'll give her, her credit as well. I'm sure Larry Mejias on the runner-up Resentment kind of wishes he had gone back to his right hand before she got there.
Yeah, on the other hand, if he does that, she's fastly able to go in the 2-path, and it's probably even easier to go around her. I don't think there was much he could do. I think he did the best job you could do with his horse.
And I think you're right. I think he was second best. I just, going back to when I first started riding, if someone got through on you and beat you, the whole room tore you up. I mean, you would just be so criticized.
Well, there's some situations where, if there's 4 horses lined across the track and you start to drift and let a guy come behind you, then you're the one who made the mistake. But in this case, where there was so much separation between the horses, if he had gone to the inside, she easily could have gone to the outside. It wouldn't have really mattered.
No, I'm not disagreeing with any of that. I'm just how it used to be.
It's a tougher room back then.
Oh, man.
Yeah, much tougher room. So that's some other terrific performances in a race named for Peeping Tom, a horse we saw, I believe, ran second in the Met Mile. He might have been the heavy favorite. I think it was one. Did Mark Cassey win it? That race, actually, a big upset in there. This was some performance by Picant off the claim for trainer Richie Staclosa. This horse has been trained by Rudy Rodriguez. Gustavo Rodriguez is standing in for him. I think this horse ran every bit as well, if not better, than he ever ran for any of his previous trainers.
Well, he really kicked on, and he was wide every step. He never had any opportunity to save any ground. And it, just had the feeling that he was claimed with this race in mind. That they said, you know what, this is a good opportunity. Pick him up for $32,000, and we can get our money back in one fell swoop.
Well, it worked out. He was much the best. I bet joking in here, I ran second and third at the exacta, but as a horse player, there's never any complaint when you finish second or second and third behind a horse that was just much better than your horse. Joking got a perfect ride from Manny Franco. He had no excuse whatsoever. He was at best second best. Picant was an hour the best in this race.
He really was. And Picant, when I was looking at the form yesterday, he had 6 wins, 13 seconds, and I hate to see that. It always makes me feel like a horse lacks a certain killer instinct. Well, I could have been more wrong because he showed a lot of killer instinct yesterday.
Well, I was wrong about him, too. One of my big concerns was he was breaking from post 12 in here, and last time he ran, I don't know if you remember this, he drifted out badly in the stretch, and I was wondering about post 12 and drifting out and thinking this is a horse that might get away from the rider. He was just wide, but didn't matter. He didn't drift out. He just had no choice.
No, and he ran straight as a string through the stretch, just right through the wire.
No, this was a very, very impressive performance. Another nice thing about the races on Saturday is not just memories of horses. We had the race named for Kelly Kipp, of course, who was a great horse trained by Alan Jerkins. We also had the Stud Muffin, the 8th race, and this was a horse that you think of Dominic Galuccio, and it's been just a year this week since he passed away. Nice to think about all these people on these races, and I'll tell you, this was a race that honored the mighty Stud Muffin.
Yeah, it absolutely did, because you had 3 horses slug it out. I thought you got 3 really good rides, and just this is everything the game is about. If you don't get excited or like this race, then maybe you got to take up another sport or another hobby. And you bring up Dominic Galuccio. Actually, March 17th, it was a year. It's kind of hard to believe a whole year went by.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But we still remember these people, and we'll remember them around the racetrack for a long, long time. And the horses also carry their memory, and that was such a nice part of this day, where the horses reminding us of all these people. Gaspar Machera's name coming up. But, man, this stretch run, I was wondering, you see Cornelio Velasquez on the inside. Well, to me, the horse turning his head a little. He did that in his own. On the head-on, Cornelio had some room in there. He was riding them hard. Maybe sometimes down the inside they don't get their legs on him the same.
Well, when he got through on Reed the Byline, who was the pacemaker, he was kind of looking at him.
Yeah.
And I thought when he finally got in front of that horse, he was going to really kick on. But by that time, the eventual winner, Day's Ride, was outside of him, and I think he just wasn't as comfortable there. Nothing Cornelio could do about it. It was kind of the hand he was dealt, and he did a great job getting through, but you wonder if maybe he was outside if it wouldn't have been flip-flop.
Well, and it worked out well because Arad was able, actually he was in front of him, but he was able to make the decision coming the stretch, and he rode Day's Ride and gave him a perfect ride.
Yep.
And we're not knocking Cornelio because he rode very well, but because he got there first, he got to go out first, and that sealed the deal and forced Cornelio to have to go inside with Wealth to Make.
Yeah, because you could see how they were staggering this way. He had one choice then to go to the fence. Hell of a race.
And also Bimata ran so well. A horse who's run very, very well 3 times since claimed by Eddie Barker. These were 3 horses laying it all down the line. It was a great way to close out the day on the Claiming Championship Series. We just saw a lot of hard knockers, and we saw terrific performances throughout the day.
Absolutely. Great racing.
Well, that was going to wrap it up for us here on the National Racing Report. A fun weekend of racing. Thanks for joining us. And some of us will be back next week. Jason and Maggie will be handling the reins for the Mig and I.